Price Hill is a neighborhood in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's a really, really neat place. I've gone through it quite a bit, and I think it's actually 4 neighborhoods in one.
3.
Okay, I was thinking Lower Price Hill.
Yeah, east, lower, and west.
Okay. You don't even take in Stephenville?
No, God, no.
Yeah, I like Stephenville. Anyway, Price Hill's on the west side of Cincinnati. A really exciting program there. Ken Smith is the director of Price Hill Will, which is a community development corporation, and I'll just turn it over to him.
Thank you. Thank you. I should say that logo, I really like it. We rarely use it, but we came up with that probably 6-7 years ago, and the comments were those 2 colors don't go together, and I just kept sitting there thinking quietly, those are the colors of my bathroom. But Price Hill, well, we are a nonprofit. We're a 501c3 community development corporation, and so we're doing quite a bit of the work that maybe you've heard about earlier, but we primarily focus on physical revitalization. That's both commercial and residential, and we do a tremendous amount of community engagement, and again, that's with the businesses and the residents, and we recognize that we can't just do the physical development, that really everything that goes into making a community great has to be addressed. I've often said if you give me enough money, I can rehab every building in our neighborhood, and it is a big neighborhood, but it still won't change some of the underlying conditions in the neighborhood. So we claim to be comprehensive, and some days I believe that, and some days I think we're just scratching the surface. But we do work with a lot of issues like safety, diversity, arts, culture, religion, youth, education, and even ecology, which is part of our foundation, and I will talk a little bit about that. And if somebody has a burning question as I'm going along, just raise your hand. I'd rather this be conversational. I've never been a teacher, and I don't want to be a teacher, so lecturing is not going to be my thing, but we can just have a conversation if that's what you guys want to do, and I promise to finish at 4:15. So I'll talk a little bit about the neighborhood. As you've heard, I'll alternate between saying Price Hill and the neighborhood or saying Price Hills and the neighborhood, because there are three distinct neighborhoods out of the 52 in Cincinnati: east, west, and lower. I always say it in that order, and it makes no sense because it's really lower, east, and then west. The population is almost 32,000 according to the last census, and at one point it was probably closer to 40 or 45,000. So we're not a small neighborhood. We're bigger than a lot of cities, and that actually represents over 10% of the population of Cincinnati. The whole city is only 300,000. It's gained a little bit. And you can see how that breaks down. Lower Price Hill is much smaller, but our housing stock is aging. We have a decrease in home ownership. It was almost all home ownership at one point, very little rental. We now have a tremendous amount of foreclosure. We have a tremendous amount of vacant property, which I've heard talked about all day. And we had some money in Cincinnati called Moving Ohio Forward, which was part of the bank settlement. And since in Price Hill alone, there was 150 homes taken down in a 1-year period. So, and to be honest with you, people noticed, but it was a drop in the bucket. We have a lot of absentee landlords now, and we have a lot of investors. I hear it every day. I got somebody who called me from Toronto last week and wanted to sell me a home they had bought as an investment. I said they could keep their investment. And we have, as a result, we have an increase in poverty and we have an increase in crime. They all seem to go together, right? Our housing, 40% of it was constructed before 1940, so it's an older neighborhood. We're not a historic district, although we have some historically designated properties, but we would certainly, I think all the neighborhood would probably qualify. Oh, Lower Price Hill, I'm sorry. Lower Price Hill is a historic district. I'm so sorry. Lower Price Hill, if you know anything about Cincinnati, you probably know about the resurgence of OTR over the Rhine. It's become an amazing transformation. It's a very large historic district, but Lower Price Hill reminds me very much on a smaller scale of what's downtown and over the Rhine. So that does vary from that very historic Lower Price Hill all the way out to a mid-20th century, almost suburban feel in West Price Hill. Our foreclosures have been absolutely unbelievable. We were the first hit, we were the hardest hit, and we're just now starting to see a little relief from it. But certainly East and West Price Hill, which had a lot of home ownership, has been second and third out of the 52 neighborhoods since I've been working there, before I've been working there. So it's a particular challenge. And I'm going to get to this in a minute. Price Hill Will's I heard it mentioned earlier, an asset-based. We take an asset-based approach, so we're not going to dwell all day on the negatives. We're going to look at our positives, and we have plenty of those too. And that's not, I don't think it's Pollyannish. No one's ever accused me of being that. But I think it's just the best way to go, and I will say this and move on. If I wanted to have a neighborhood meeting and complain about the bad housing in the neighborhood or the condition of the housing or the landlords, I could get 400 people to come out with 30 minutes notice. And they would complain all night long, and then they'd all go home and nothing would happen. But if I asked people to come out and talk about how we can rehab our historic housing stock, I might get 50 with 3 weeks notice, but they'll actually want to do something at the end of the meeting. The other is just venting, and that's what I've kind of come to learn. If you want to talk about problems, you can get all the talk you want to, but that's all you're going to get, talk. So our community assets, we have a tremendous amount of long-term residents, even though the demographics have changed. We have strong community councils. Those are fairly unique to Cincinnati. They're almost quasi-governmental bodies. They're chartered by the city and act as a smaller council. We have a tremendous amount of churches. They're closing all over the city, but Price Hill has all our Catholic churches still open, except for the one in Lower Price Hill. Schools, we have tremendous number of schools, both public and parochial. I think there's like 17 schools in our neighborhood. Nonprofit organizations, including my organization, we have a tremendous housing stock. We're proximity to downtown, you'll see that in a minute. And we have a tremendous amount of green space, probably more than any other neighborhood in the city. I was going to read something and I kind of forgot about it, but it'll probably give you a feel for the neighborhood. And it's the only thing I'm going to read today. I wrote this for a grant a couple years ago and it kind of sums it up. We were one of the first suburbs of the city. Price Hill was settled primarily by middle-class German Catholics looking to escape the poor urban basin. And it got pretty bad in the 1800s and people were looking for a better place. The problem is Cincinnati, if you're familiar with it at all, we have a lot of hills and the hills are verging on mountains. So it wasn't the easiest to get to Price Hill. Eventually they put in the incline. But Price Hill, again, was settled by people who had means that could leave the urban basin. And it was relatively stable until the latter half of the 20th century when the housing stock and the infrastructure began to age. And with like many areas of the country, people began to move out to the suburbs. It's that whole, white flight, urban flight. They were just like the people moving into Price Hill 125 years ago. The people who left 30 years ago were looking for a better life, and they thought they were going to find it in the suburbs. It's kind of ironic now that you look at the suburbs. The first ones they moved to look very much like some of the neighborhoods that they fled, which tells me that you can't run from your problems. You might as well address them head on. But there are people that the joke on the west side of Cincinnati is people just kept moving farther west, and now they're actually in West Harrison, Indiana. I think they'll stop when they get to Indianapolis. But we've actually lost 26% of our population since 1980. So if you think about that, we're at 32 now. Without doing the reverse math, we were ginormous at one point. But really our problems exacerbated in the 1990s and the early 2000s with the credit. Basically anybody could get a mortgage. Our housing stock was aging. Mom and Dad had moved out of the neighborhood. Grandma and Grandpa may have still been there, but they hadn't done any maintenance on the house in 30 years. So when Grandma and Grandpa left, either willingly or otherwise, the house had to be discounted deeply because, well, they hadn't done any maintenance. That's the nature. But it perfectly coincided with the easy credit boom and the easy financing. So a lot of people bought in Price Hill because it was affordable and it was a nice neighborhood. But they got in over their heads pretty quickly. They probably shouldn't have been given the mortgage in the first place. The home had some lipstick put on it and was sold, and all of a sudden they realized the electric's 70 years old, and you plug in the hairdryer, which I wouldn't know about, but you plug that in and the whole thing goes up. So a lot of those loans started to go bad. And again, we were one of the first neighborhoods in the city to start seeing this, and we were complaining loudly, but I don't think anybody was listening. They're like, oh, it's a Price Hill issue. We don't have a foreclosure problem. Well, now we've moved to the point where the suburbs have the foreclosure crisis. But in fact, actually, I'll just back up a minute to say we saw this so early that before I started working at Price Hill, 8.5 years ago, our organization actually sued investors because we saw what they were doing is so predatory. And we actually got a fairly significant settlement the day before the judge ruled we didn't have standing, so that worked out very well. We thought we were being pretty innovative, and apparently we were a little too innovative, but we settled at the right time. But you know, many of the new homeowners and the renters that moved into the Praise-Hill was low income. They were minority, both African American and Hispanic. They had no previous connection to the neighborhood, and as a result, they didn't have a support system in our community. So, you know, no matter how bad things were in Over the Rhine, if you'd lived there a generation, you had some support system. You knew your neighbors, somebody could watch your kids, there was some place to go get whatever you needed. And all of a sudden they're in a community that, while we have good bus service, it's not exactly easy to go where you want to go when you go, and you may be on a street and there's no corner bodega, corner convenience store like there is in your old neighborhood. So it was a real experience. You know, a lot of people bought these houses and had never seen a lawnmower being used, right? They didn't have it. They lived in a very urban area, and this is quasi, you know, it's not, well, we're very urban, but we have yards. So they had a total lack of support. So again, in addition to the rapid change with the neighborhood demographics, the businesses started to suffer, right? Because all of a sudden you lose a quarter of your population, and it's a quarter of the population that's lived there for a generation. The people who took advantage of the bakery, the new people moving in, don't know anything about the bakery and don't care about it, and it doesn't mean anything that grandma got her bagels there every morning. You know, they've got different tastes and different likes. So a lot of the neighborhood businesses started to close, and then it just spirals from there, right? So you get into this cycle of disinvestment. The more you disinvest, the cheaper the property gets, the more people take advantage of it by moving into the neighborhood, and you just go from there. So I said earlier I focus on the assets, but I think you have to understand the problem before you can kind of understand what we're doing. So that brings us to how Praise-Hill got started. We're 10 and a half years old. Well, August, I guess it will be 11 years old. August 1st, 2004, we were created. But it goes back a little farther than that. Again, the neighborhood was in crisis, and I think one of the things that brought everybody together, a young man was shot, a high school student in front of Elder High School, which again, if you're anywhere near Cincinnati, I didn't grow up there, but the first question they ask is where you went to high school, and on the west side they mean, did you go to Elder? Elder's a parochial school, and it's to have a kid shot in front of the all-boys parochial school on the street and killed, he died, was traumatic. Things like that didn't happen in Praise-Hill. So people really, it became that moment, either we put up a fight or we just close shop and leave. And so there was a group working in the neighborhood called Imago, and they were an environmental education group. And they said, we're going to put a plan together for working on this neighborhood. So they did a tremendous community engagement process that lasted maybe 2 years, interviewed 3,000 to 4,000 people, which if you think about that, that's just a tremendous amount of work. Again, they did it all on an asset-based approach. They did an appreciative inquiry, so they didn't say, what's wrong with this neighborhood and how can we fix it? They said, what do you like about this neighborhood and what can we do to make it better? And that is the core of our organization, and I've really bought into it. It's just a better way of looking at it. So in other words, don't look at the blighted buildings that aren't fixed over here. Look at the architecture and see what asset you have to work with. There's a lot of neighborhoods that don't have those assets sitting out on 10th Street. And as a result of that, a community plan came together, and we asked people, if people came out to these meetings and said, what I appreciate about the neighborhood is the arts, then we said, how would you like to work on the arts? So it kind of was a sucker question, right? They were getting into, you asked a question, hey, I'm passionate about the housing, good, you're on the housing committee. So there were like 10 or 12 action teams that came out of this neighborhood plan. But one of the big takeaways, the environmental group had no way to execute this plan. That's not their mission. They weren't a community development corporation. They were in way over their head. And they're great people. They're still partners in everything we do. But they were way in over their head with a plan this comprehensive. So the funders who were kind of putting a little money into this said, we might buy into it more, but you're going to have to form a community development corporation and get some people in who know about community development, not just, you know, environmental education. And it's not maybe enough that you just love the neighborhood. You actually have to have some expertise in the work. So the plan, by the way, was called Praise-Hill Will. If you think our name's a little strange, it was kind of a statement, an affirmative statement of what we were going to do as a neighborhood. But so Price Hill Will, the strategic plan for the neighborhood, became Price Hill Will, the independent organization with its own board of directors, and that's what happened on August 1st, 2004. I guess that was the end of the slide. So we started that year with $56,000 and no employees. And then last year, we just got our audit finished, so I think that number is fairly close. Our budget last year was $1.3 million, so it's been an interesting 10 years. And we went from no staff to, well, 12 staff, a couple of AmeriCorps, and all kinds of interns running around the building. I've actually got 8 people in one office, and don't tell the fire marshal when you, it is something to behold. So I know you can't read this, but our organizational chart, just quickly, I mean, we have a board of directors, obviously. There's me, we have a director of real estate development, we have a director of community engagement, we have a sustainability coordinator who works on gardening and access to healthy foods. We have 2 vistas from the New York Coalition to End Hunger, which I don't know how that happened, but nonetheless we have them. We have a community programming coordinator trying to get people involved in our community. We have a community outreach director. We have a music program for youth, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is very unusual. It's one of the most amazing programs I've ever seen. And then we have our finance director who makes sure I stay solvent. But yeah, I'm going to talk about some of the projects we do. Like I said, if you have a question about any of them, just raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll keep it to the end. This is not untypical for the housing stock we have. The one on the upper left-hand corner is obviously a commercial building, residential to the right, and a mix down on the left. But in terms of physical revitalization, our first and core program is home ownership. As I said earlier, we were almost exclusively home ownership in Price Hill. I'm guessing it probably reached 70, 80, maybe 90% home ownership in that community. So our community has said it's not that we're opposed to rental, but we have all these single-family homes. So why would we go out and build a lot of apartment buildings? We'll rehab the ones we have, but we want to focus on home ownership. We've invested over $7 million at this point into single-family homes. We're currently meeting contractors tomorrow on one. Kind of a typical example, there is a house behind that landscaping, and this is kind of what the interior of the house looked like. I mean, that looks like the interior of every home we've ever done. It was terrible. That may have been one of the worst. That home was donated to us. It's the most expensive donation I've ever had. That's the after. There were still people, I saved that house and it was a corner lot on a very important street, and I've still got people mad over the sodding, but that's as much as we could do, and it was one of the most expensive projects we've done, but it turned out absolutely beautiful. I'm just going to do a few of the houses. A before picture of one of my favorite houses that we've done on Swear Avenue. I know that's not how it looks, but it is Swear. The interior was lovely. I think somebody mentioned the paneling earlier today, that we had it. And most of these homes, it isn't just ugly. It's, again, it may have 100 amp electric service in it. The roof's falling in. The floors are caving in. This looks like it's cosmetic. It was not cosmetic. The after pictures. And what we're doing with this home ownership program is not just getting people to move back in the neighborhood. We're trying to move the market. Because if you live on this street and you're underwater on your house, you know, you bought your house for 150 and now they're telling you it's worth 100, and your roof goes bad, how in the heck are you going to get an equity line to put a new roof on when you're $50,000 underwater? Nobody's going to give you a loan. But if I can fix that house up next door and sell it for 150, all of a sudden you've got a little equity in your home, or at least you can demonstrate to the bank with a straight face that if they give you $10,000 to put on a new roof or do some other major repair, theoretically they could get their money back. In a lot of cases, that's what causes even further spiraling down of the neighborhood, because you have an older home and maybe they do want to fix it, maybe they want to stay there, but if you can't get an equity line because the bank says you have no equity in your home, you just have to sit and watch the roof leak, I guess, and eventually the home's not salvageable, right? I mean, that's the end of that kind of spiral downward. We just finished this project. It's 4 row houses. Again, I just have exterior shots here. It was ugly. Man, it was ugly. It was there wasn't a piece of plumbing, a piece of electric. There was nothing in that building. This actually is the most expensive project we've ever gotten into, and this has about killed me. After we sold the home on the right, which was the highest price home we've ever sold in Price Hill, that we've sold, a week after, we realized we were going to have to replace the entire water line. That's after it was occupied. That was a bad day at work. This is a great project. We were talking about it earlier. It's an apartment building you'll see a little bit more of. $7 million project, 7.4, 37 units of senior housing. I was saying earlier that my best friend lived on the other side of this neighborhood. I wasn't familiar with the neighborhood at that time, but I would sit at this intersection and look at that building and think, well, somebody's got to do something. And nobody was doing anything. And then I got hired as the executive director of the Community Development Corporation. And I thought, well, I guess I'm going to have to do something. So we convinced a large developer to come to the neighborhood. I bought the building. It's crazy. I didn't want to own that building for 1 minute, much less waiting until I got funding, but I did. It ended up being LEED certified. That's the before pictures, by the way. It was the last time I was in there before we started rehab, I was in there with the city development director. We were standing on the corner after we walked out, and one of his staff said, "What is all over your pants?" And we both looked down. Fleece so thick that I didn't even know what they were. I'd never seen a flea in my life. But yeah, he took most of his clothes off standing on the street corner. I decided I would just wait till I got to Kroger to find some insecticide or something. So that's the finished product. There were people in the community that wanted to tear this building down. Again, because it would be cheaper, it would be quicker, it would be gone. It had sat in that previous condition for 10 years. People were tired of looking at it, tear it down. It would have been a crime against humanity. But, and some future projects. We, effective Tuesday with the city budget, this survived the city budget. I kind of got crossways between the mayor and council. The council decided maybe they wanted to take some punishment out on the mayor, and the mayor was supporting my project, and it got a little questionable. But this is 18 really, really nasty one-bedroom apartments in what used to be 6 row houses. They're going back to 6 row houses this fall. It's going to be a tremendous asset for the neighborhood. It's next door. To the right immediately of that is Holy Family Catholic Church, one of the most beautiful churches in the neighborhood. That's one of the worst buildings left in that area. It's soon to be 6 market rate rentals, and someday we'll hope to sell those. So it's a great project. We're starting a homesteading project where I'm going to take homes that aren't ideal for trying to change the market dynamic, and we're going to work, even though there's some fair housing issues with this, I'm going to figure out a way to do it. We really want to help the immigrant community. We're probably about 10% Hispanic at this point. Whatever the census says, it's an undercount for obvious reasons. A lot of the Hispanic folks in our community don't like to tell the census where they're at, but you can't go to Kroger without realizing when you walk in Kroger and you have a Mexican cheese section, it's a pretty good indication, although for the record, they're all Guatemalan. So and that's an interesting thing too, because people are they mean so well, and they say, well, you should have Spanish classes and blah, blah, blah. It's great, but most of our Guatemalan population is indigenous, and their first language is not Spanish. It's a language called Ma. And so Spanish is their second language, and English is their third language. And so it brings some really interesting dynamics to the neighborhood. And we have a $500,000 grant from Wells Fargo to do more single-family housing. I sued them 5 years ago for the terrible things they did in our neighborhood. I don't think the left hand knew what the right hand knew when they gave me the grant. So I'm going to move on to commercial redevelopment. We just finished a new theater, performance theater in the neighborhood called the Incline Theater, the Warsaw Federal Incline Theater. It was a $10 million project when all was said and done. It's the first new theater built in the city of Cincinnati since the Aronoff downtown that does the Broadway series. It's an absolutely spectacular building, garage. We got creative because it was new market tax credits and we rolled the public rec center into it. Don't ask about it, it seems illegal, but it worked. So if you're looking at the front door of the theater, you see the theater. If you turn around standing on that, or inside, that's your view. So that's the view from our neighborhood. It's the best view in the city, bar none. If you turn to the left, you can see all the way to UC. If you turn to the right, you can see all of northern Kentucky, including Ludlow downriver. We bought 13 parcels in our business district. Again, you know, I know a lot of people from Richmond have been to Cincinnati quite often. Pre-sold chilies are a local fame. Everybody eats there on election day. Every politician in the city's there. including the coroner who was eating next to me the last time I was there. I don't know, there's something about the coroner sitting next to you while you're eating unhealthy that is a little unnerving. But we bought this. You see my problem with this development? If anybody's ever seen the movie Up, that's eventually what's going to happen to the dentist that's in my way. But we'll see. I've got another performance theater owned by the same group on the left, and then I have the chili restaurant that everybody goes to on the right. So it's prime real estate. I've just got to convince the dentist that he needs to. The chili restaurant's owned by the Greeks. The dentist is Ernesto Sabato. He's Italian. I think they can work it out, or somebody's going to get hurt. This is where Margot's going to get me. We are not a preservation group, although you've seen that we work very hard about preservation. I've recently acquired this building. It is coming down. There is a bakery there that people are very fond of, or was there years ago, that people still talk about again. Their grandma bought her wedding cake there. So for a few people, I'm the arch enemy. For most of the neighborhood, they're pretty happy. There's a terrible convenience store behind it. I will be buying that because that funding was also in the city budget and also survived the flood. So I will get an entire corner, and I actually own a cell phone tower now that's behind this building. It's a dream come true. If I get the cell tower and the liquor license that went with the convenience store, it's going to be amazing. This is a building we're doing in Lower Price Hill. It's going to be, and this is such a neat project. It's an urban agricultural project. It's already up and running in a different temporary location. They grow microgreens, and even though I grew up with my dad farming like you wouldn't believe, I had to ask the question whether they were really small greens or whether they were just harvesting them early. They're harvesting them early. But they go to all the fancy restaurants in town, right? So somebody wants some fancy little miniature version of kale on their salad. We're growing it indoors here. So it's a for-profit company that's going to occupy the space. We took bids on it today, by the way, so we're getting started. It's very exciting. I teased at the closing that I don't know what I'm going to do with this if I have grow lights and all this indoor agriculture equipment. If the business doesn't succeed, I'm going to have to find a use for grow lamps. And I am not making this up. The guy said, "Oh, that's what the last guy that was renting the building did with it." And I said, "Urban agriculture?" He said, "No, indoor marijuana." That all of a sudden made sense to me about what was in the basement. I never knew that. He got arrested and everything in the building was seized by the government because he was actually growing marijuana in this building, and I made that joke one too many times. 2 days later, Channel 9 called me to do a story about it. I said I had no comment. The greens we are growing go on a salad. This is my other project. I've just got to figure out how to fund this. This is a Masonic temple. That is a Masonic temple. It's 12,000 square feet, 2 auditoriums. I'm wanting to turn this into a community arts and events center. We own the building now. I was lucky enough to buy that building for $15,000. It will cost a little bit more than that to fix. This was designed by Hannaford, the firm in Cincinnati, very famous. They've done a lot of the great buildings in Cincinnati, like Music Hall, am I correct? All right. This is the interior. The lower auditorium, the upper auditorium, one of the back staircases. There are 3 skylights in the building that all have Masonic symbols. I am not a Mason, but there's things in this building I cannot explain. And nobody will tell me what they are. There's a trap door that we found. It's just amazing. But it's going to be an amazing property. The exterior renderings that we've had done for the finished product. Oh. Lemonade from Lemons. One of my staff said, "Is there smoke coming out of the building across the street?" And I'm like, "No." And I look again, I'm like, "I think there is." Within 30 minutes, it ended up being like a 3-alarm fire. I've never seen so many trucks in my entire life. Very beautiful building in the heart of our neighborhood burned. Within the next 3 weeks, I'm completing a community park on the land, which will have a stage, water feature, a memorial to the different branches in the military. And it will become what we didn't have in the neighborhood, which is kind of a community front lawn or a community living room, I've heard it referred to. We already have the first concert scheduled. It'll be the place where the Christmas tree goes, you know. So it's the best we could do, losing that very, very beautiful building. And last week I got a $120,000 grant from the city to help with one of the city's wrecks. It's a tot lot, that's what they call it, although I guess that term's out of fashion. But it's a small playground in our business district. So with that, I'm just going to go through a little bit more, and then we'll open it up to questions. We don't just do physical development. We work with the businesses in our neighborhoods, either doing facade improvements, the before and after of the building on the right. We actually, in Cincinnati, it's the only place I know of where Appalachians are considered minority, and that's the Urban Appalachian Council, which recently went out of business, I guess, for Appalachians are kind of dispersed in the city now, but we had a huge influx in the 40s and 50s, much like Indianapolis and Detroit and Cleveland, of people moving from East Tennessee, East Kentucky, West Virginia, looking for jobs. But it's really a demographic in the city, and was primarily the population in Lower Price Hill. But we do things like the gateway signs. We would fund that. We own the easement that thing sits on, and we're always working to basically benefit the businesses, not just physically. We do things like movie night in the park on the left. Again, that's our view. That's actually where the incline came up the hill, that little park. That's where the incline stopped, and that was the incline house. So that is across from our new theater. Kids art project, we make it multi-purpose so that we can take the art in vacant buildings. We just make them a little prettier by putting kids art in the front. We do a lot of public art, murals. That's kids' art on the side of, that's the Historical Society, the Art Deco building. And you can see the top of St. Lawrence Church, which is, we have some amazing churches in the neighborhood. They're all different. One's kind of a Mediterranean style. Holy Family, I'm not sure what we would call that. Byzantine, right? Yes, it's very Byzantine. That's clearly like European Gothic almost. And the St. William, I guess, it's more Mediterranean looking. My youth program, my orchestra, I had a young lady come to me 4 years ago and said, I'm doing a fellowship at the New England Conservatory of Music, and her partner, he was getting his doctorate in conducting at the University of Cincinnati, and she said, I want to start this program. It's based on a Venezuelan model. And I said, I don't really think I'm interested. She said, one of your funders said you would talk to me. And I said, I might be interested. Really, I was thinking, how do I get her out of my office, because we're not running a music program. But the model in Venezuela is based on community development. It's about engaging the parents, engaging the youth, giving them something to do. And it's completely a free program for kids. And my first thought was, well, if we do this, it's amazing to have an instructor from the New England Conservatory teaching. She did go to IU too, as an undergrad. Having that kind of thing in our community, we're going to have all the middle class kids in the neighborhood sign up for this immediately. But what we realized about 2 weeks into it, they have soccer practice, they have ballet, they have this, they have that, and this is a 5-day-a-week program. Not one middle class kid in the neighborhood wanted to do it, but the kids that didn't have any other options, they're in this program. It's now 70 kids strong, and we've started a preschool program at one of the elementaries to kind of bring kids into it. It's all string instrument currently, and some bucket drumming. This is the most amazing program ever. It's changed these kids' lives. They played music hall. That's left. They played outside before Aida, the opera last year. They played on stage, and that's actually the conductor of the CSO conducting the kids. Cincinnati Symphony, well, actually it's the conductor of the Pops. I should be specific when I say that. President Sano Ono from UC, he started practicing with the kids, and he started playing cello again after 35 years because of the kids. And then the picture on the lower right is they played for the last 2 years, they played for the opera, does a performance every year in the Cincinnati Zoo. And so these kids, everybody in the arts in Cincinnati know about these kids, and it's just been transformational. We're actually moving facilities into the one of the historic firehouses so we can accommodate all the kids we have now. And then we do a ton of community engagement. That's called a billy goat. When they told me a business owner in the neighborhood donated a billy goat, I was very confused. I really wanted to turn that donation down until they explained it. But it's like a giant vacuum cleaner for litters, parking lot. We use it a lot after festivals in the neighborhood. Volunteers can sign it out. We do a lot of public space improvements. Again, gateway signs. Other blight reduction. We spend a tremendous amount of time doing blight reduction. We work with our Port Authority to get vacant lots into the hands of neighbors. You were talking earlier about a land bank. It took a long time to get a land bank in Cincinnati. Cuyahoga County, which is Cleveland, had one. They had one for years, and they were the only county in the state of Ohio that was authorized by state statute to have one. I think now 50 some counties can have one. You have to be over a certain population to have a land bank. Hamilton Counties is ran by the Port Authority, and it's amazing. They can take title to property. They can clear the liens to the property, on the property's mortgages, tax liens. They can hold that property indefinitely without paying taxes on it and without having any legal liability. So I can call the port and they'll transfer any property they can get their hands on to me for $500. That is an asset. It's, again, just some beautification projects. The painting job we coordinated the painting job on this historic home on the lower right-hand side because we were trying to help the homeowners save that home. They were not able to save that home. My guy who runs our agriculture program, our urban gardening program, ended up buying that home out of foreclosure, $15,000. That home, you can play basketball on the 3rd floor. I've never seen ceilings that high on the 3rd floor. Again, beautification. We do a ton of litter pickups. It's a great way to get people involved in the community and just, of course, make it look better. And again, our gardening program. We have 5 community gardens that we maintain, and we have a great program called Grow It Forward. It's obviously a play on words, but we will come out and help you install a garden at your home because we realize going to a central location and sharing a garden with 20 other people may not be everybody's idea of the best way to approach this. So we'll come to if you have the property, rent it, own it, we don't care. We'll teach you how to garden and we'll help you build a garden. You've just got to agree to help the next person down the line. So grow it forward. This particular one is near the Reich Center, and there used to be an elementary school sitting there, and I can tell you there is 2 inches of dirt and concrete underneath of it, which is why we have the raised beds, and I figured that out the hard way. Great American Insurance Company, they do crop insurance. Their crop insurance division agreed to pay for the garden. I thought that was a nice tie-in. They do not insure the tomatoes, though. And the last thing, I am going to play a video if it works, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So the completion of the Port Authority's study of the incline district's market potential this year showed that we have some great strategic advantages. We have great proximity to downtown. Secondly, we have good transportation network. The incline district has wonderful cultural amenities and a wonderful collection of parks and green spaces. Finally, we have some of the most affordable housing in all of Greater Cincinnati.
My Cincinnati is a free youth orchestra program. We started with 11 students who were coming every day after school, and we have expanded this year to reach 60 Price Hill children. The mission of the program is to use music as a vehicle for social change. By learning an instrument, students in My Cincinnati are building valuable life skills such as self-confidence, discipline, responsibility, hard work, teamwork by playing in an orchestra. The program is free and we provide the instruments, and there's no prior musical experience necessary. The concerts are always free and open to the public, and I hope you can join us.
I cannot be more delighted at the recent development and exciting projects that are going on, especially in the Incline District. Price Hill will just purchased the historic Hannaford Masonic Hall, and you'll have to stay tuned for the exciting things going to happen there. We have a number of new exciting venues in Price Hill. Just this past year, a longtime business on Warsaw decided to stay in Warsaw specifically because they saw all the exciting new things going on. We've got a long tradition of supporting the arts in Price Hill. I think we are in a good position to continue to create that next generation of our creative class.
So Price Hill has a long history of being a green neighborhood. Decades ago, Imago, a 40-acre nature preserve, started, and there's a trail system there that's open to the public, and they also do educational programming. That helped launch other initiatives. The Eco Village, where people come together around common ecological concerns. An urban CSA, it's one of the few in the city that is producing food entirely in the city. So there's a lot of potential for all of these existing programs or initiatives to grow and expand what they're doing, but there's opportunity for a lot of other things to start popping up as well. I think we're building to a lot of momentum for these green initiatives in Price Hill.
Price Hill Wheel's role is to take on more riskier projects that private developers would not be able to complete. One of the perfect examples of that is the Oberon. That was a huge project, that was a huge eyesore for the community. As a result of our work, we've seen an uptick in the number of investments, as well as the number of homeowners that we have in Price Hill. Price Hill Will has completed over 100 housing units, which has a total investment of $6 million. We are currently working with the neighborhood to develop a Price Hill plan that will involve a number of new housing units in the neighborhood to continue to maintain the diversity, the historic charm, as well as the neighborhood as one of the most upcoming communities in Cincinnati.
So we actually had a lot of different options when it came to where to locate a new theater. The Incline District was an exciting possibility, a neighborhood that's really on the rise. But we are a regional draw. We have 336 different zip codes represented by our patron base. To be the new shiny theater on the hill in the area, I think it's going to light it up between the restaurants and us. We're going to have 120 performance nights a year, 120 nights a year where there'll be people walking about, visiting the restaurants, looking at this part of Price Hill with a whole new perspective.
So I'd be happy to take any questions. I did, while I was watching that video, it did remind me, we just got a $110,000, we're still haggling back and forth, grant from the Kresge Foundation to find Detroit. I met their CEO. I attended the Vacant Land Conference, I guess earlier well, it was in May. May? God, time's flying fast. Their president of the Kresge Foundation was the keynote speaker. But we're getting over $100,000 to work on arts placemaking. So we're going to use the arts to further define Price Hill, and that may take a form of economic development. It may take physical development. It may just be creating events that make people in Cincinnati recognize the arts that's already existing in the neighborhood. But the goal of this 2-year program is, at the end of it, there's going to be physical transformation using the arts. So it's not arts for the sake of doing something pretty or entertaining. It's arts for the sake of changing a neighborhood. So the police captain, I shouldn't say this, but he's the nicest guy in the world, but he's old school West Side. He's like, I think we're making progress. I won't say exactly what he said, but there's a lot of artists moving in the neighborhood. I'm like, that's how you define progress. I just wasn't going to argue with him. So. But it is a sign, though. I mean, the last home we sold was a member of the symphony that wanted to live in the neighborhood, so I'll take that all day long. So any questions?
Yeah. What's the blend of funding for the CDC?
You know, I knew somebody was going to ask that, and I thought about it earlier, not to cut you off, but every single person who has spoke today has said Place Matters in one way or another. The large funding initiative in Cincinnati is called Place Matters, and it's about 9 years ago. The Greater Cincinnati Foundation, United Way, SC Ministry, Sisters of Charity, their ministry foundation, banks, everybody that funded this kind of work said, we're spreading our money so thin it's not making a difference. Let's pool it, invest it in neighborhoods that have a lot of challenges but have a lot of opportunities. So we're not picking the worst neighborhood in the city. We don't know what the answer to that neighborhood is, but we know our money's not going to change anything. We're also not investing it anymore in neighborhoods that really don't need it. We're going to pool it and invest it in places that matter. Now, I hear a lot of snide remarks from neighborhoods that didn't get the investment that they're a place that doesn't matter. But the truth of the matter is, if you have limited resources, you've got to put them where you can make a difference. So that's one of our largest funders. SC Ministry Foundation, the Sisters of Charity, were founded in Price Hill. They run Mount St. Joseph College University now. They have Good Sam Hospital. The nuns are sitting on a fortune because they're good with their money. So they're a good patron of ours. And then a lot of the money to do the housing work, that comes from the state, federal, or local government. I mean, there's no way a foundation can pay for doing a $7 million apartment building. There's no foundations that hand out checks like that. So it's a combination of everything. And some of the smaller programs, gardening, things like that, we find somebody that has a passion for gardening, and we ask them for that money.
What was kind of, you mentioned that you were able to buy a house, rehab it, and sell it for $150,000. You probably, when you started 10 years ago, houses weren't going for that. So when you start with like $30,000 house and you go to the bank to get a loan, what argument did you use to kind of get that first project?
Well, we have in Cincinnati and a lot of larger cities, Indianapolis has one, Local Initiative Support Corporation. They're a national intermediary. So we would get a loan. We have a line of credit through, fortunately, through very good management, if I do say so myself, we cash flow most stuff. We have used a line of credit recently, but I'm paying that off the next time they send me a bill. We would prefer not to do it that way, but the reality is for a homeowner doing that, it would have been very difficult, right? So most of the homes we buy, we're buying for between $10,000 and $20,000, and we're selling them anywhere from $90,000 to $140,000. A bank would not do that. A bank in this neighborhood would not loan you that money if you were an individual. They wouldn't do it for me either, in fact. When we did our office, I went down to the local federal savings and loan, and they said, we don't want to do that. And then after a little cajoling, they said, we'll do it for you. And I said, well, I appreciate that, but we ended up going a different route. But it's not easy, but yeah, we cash flow it currently. The good thing is that $500,000 from Wells Fargo, they gave to me in a lump sum. They actually, at the check presentation, gave me a check for $500,000. They didn't even wire transfer it. It was the strangest thing ever. I dropped it on the street after the press conference, and I forgot I had $500,000 check on me. Anyway. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
When you sell a property that you rehabilitated, do you have certain requirements that how they proceed and maintain that property?
No.
How do you keep an eye, a watchful eye on that?
We're selling these at market. We're selling these at market rate. In fact, we're selling them. We're pushing the market. So if you can qualify for a $150,000 mortgage, and your credit is, I'm not your mother. I'm assuming if you are, we ask them to go to home buyer education. We do ask that they do that, but I'm selling these on the open market, right? And they're not getting a subsidy. The construction's subsidized, but not the buying. I would never. The worst thing you could do trying to revitalize a neighborhood is to take a home that's worth $150 and sell it to somebody for $125. That's really going to, I'll watch my language, tick the neighbor off when you undersell a home because their value just went down, right? So we want to get as much as we can out of it, and as a result, they don't owe me anything, right? They paid top dollar for that house. So for me to come and say, will you pay the house I'm selling tomorrow? Actually, I was telling the gentleman from Huff back there, my Huff agent moved it to Monday. So the home I'm selling on Monday, they're paying above list price. I don't have a lot of leverage to say, oh, and by the way, you're going to do this, and I'm going to check up on you in 6 months. They would tell me to go pound salt. But having said that, the neighbors do. If I do end up selling a home to somebody that doesn't mow the grass, they'll call me 4 years later and say, why didn't you screen those people better? And I said, well, I don't know. Why didn't you screen the last home you sold? We're doing this on the market. And we've had several we've had probably 3 out of the 60 that we've done that have foreclosed. And again, if I hear that's going to happen, I reach out to them, but at the end of the day, I can't. They don't owe me anything, right? Even a return phone call. Somebody in the back had a question, or did I just imagine that?
I was just curious about, you buy a house for $20,000 and you sell it for $110,000. You said the construction subsidized. Can you explain that a little more, and then what that costs?
Sure. Well, if I buy a home I'm just going to use round numbers because I'm, not that good with math. Say I buy it for $25,000. It may cost me $150,000. to get it in the condition I want it. I may only be able to sell it for 140. So somebody's got to take a loss on that, and that's where I look to the city or the state who may want to encourage home ownership. So the actual construction's written down, but if the home's worth 140, I'm going to sell it for 140. There's no way I'm taking 135. I'm going to get what I can out of it, which drives my realtor crazy. He said, "What difference does it make to you? I mean, the money's not coming out of your pocket if you lose 5,000 more." I said, "No, but the equity's coming out of the neighbor's pocket." So you want your neighbor's home to sell for a lot more than yours, right? So anything else? I know I'm standing between you and a reception, I think so. All right, I appreciate it, guys.
I've seen a lot of these projects that Ken's talking about, and Priceville's a neighborhood in renaissance, and we sure appreciate what you're doing, and I think we can learn a lot from your example.
Oh, I wanted to say, on the front table, I put some business cards. I put a couple of propaganda pieces from our organization, both the music program and just the organization. So feel free to take it if you want to. Our website got hacked, so it's unrepairable, if that's a word. So we're going to have to start over. So our website's fairly useless, but our Facebook page is a great way to get information, including the videos and even more videos about the neighborhood. So.
Great. Thank you again. Fill out your evaluation sheets. We do have some wine and cheese if someone would like to imbibe. We have iced tea, lemonade, and water in the back. If you want to talk more, and if you want, I'll open up the house across the street if anybody would like to take a look. Thank you again for coming, and put us down on your calendar for next year.